There's a moment in life that just stops you cold. And it's not when something bad happens exactly. It's when something bad happens and you realize you're facing it completely alone. And that moment came for me after years of holding it together. I'd been through a brutal divorce. When I tried dating again eventually, the guy died. I'd had 14 major surgeries, and just all of this was in a few years. And as everything was falling apart, I looked around for help, for support, for someone to show up with soup or sit with me on the worst day. And people would show up, sort of, they'd come, they'd bring something, they'd talk for a little bit. But it's just that these hardships, these surgeries and stuff, they just kept happening. And after a while, people stopped coming. And then I was alone. I had no real friends, not the kind who show up, not the kind you can call in a crisis. They're just, people I knew. And I had been there for some of them, but it just turned out not to be a reciprocal relationship. They were people I'd seen at work or at events or in passing, but no one, who I could lean on when I needed it the most. And this hit me like a punch in the chest. I had built my whole life this way, and I had to face that. I was friendly with everyone, but I was close to no one. And it wasn't that I didn't want friends. I wanted them desperately, but something was in the way. Some invisible membrane, that's what it felt like, something between me and other people. And I finally had to ask myself the question I'd been avoiding for decades, like, why don't I have close friendships? And why has it always been this way? And that was the moment everything started to change, because I stopped waving the problem off as, a temporary thing or something I could blame on my circumstances or other people. And I started investigating, what was actually going on in me. So I grew up in a house where connection was sketchy. It wasn't reliable. And my parents were alcoholic. They were neglectful. They had a lot of drama of their own. And like a lot of kids who grow up like that, I learned to be really independent, to not need anyone, to never expect attention or help or affection from anyone. So I built a life where I never had to ask, where I never had to need anything, where I could do everything myself. But here's the thing, trauma wounds don't just come from the disappointed feeling that you were neglected. The neglect itself can cause changes to your nervous system, in childhood development, where you don't end up learning to naturally connect like you were supposed to, or you can't connect fully. And I've learned that it's incredibly common for traumatized people to feel a sense of disconnection from people in every part of their lives, in every kind of relationship. So I didn't know that back then. I just knew that I felt separate from people. I could be in a room, at a party, even with someone I loved, and still feel completely disconnected. And then after my divorce and the death and all the surgery, when everything fell apart, I saw the full cost of what this life of disconnection was. Because, you can kind of be independent when you physically can take care of yourself, but when you need people, you need people. And I didn't have anyone who would show up. And I realized, I wasn't just unlucky with friends. There had to be something I was doing, because it was like a pattern. I was isolating. But isolation doesn't just happen. It's not a random condition. It's a set of behaviors and habits and reactions that end up pushing people away, or you end up pulling away. So I started to study myself, and what I found shocked me. I found, I thought that I was so good at this, but I found I had 9 obstacles. I counted them. I wrote them down. This was a whole journal that I had. 9 obstacles inside me that had been blocking connection my whole life. And these are common in people with trauma, and they're sneaky. You don't always see them right away, but they shape everything. So here's what they looked like for me. First, I felt like I didn't belong. I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. Sometimes I thought I did for like 5 seconds or a day, and then the feeling would come. No matter where I was, I had the sense that I was different, like there was a secret code everyone else got and that I didn't get it. I found out that's normal. Number 2 was I was socially awkward. I didn't know how to be myself in front of other people. I made a lot of jokes, but not always at the right moment, you know. I could be alienating with my sense of humor, and it would come off as insensitive sometimes. I either said nothing, you know, to compensate for this, I would just be really quiet, or I would say too much. 3 is I lacked social attunement, and I missed cues. I didn't always pick up on what people needed. Sometimes I talked over people, or I gave advice when all they needed was to be heard. Then number 4, I couldn't trust my perception. I was either hypervigilant and seeing rejection where there wasn't any, or I was completely blind to red flags. I didn't know how to tell what was, really going on with people. 5 was my boundaries were all over the place. Sometimes I had walls. Other times I just let people, all over my life, just come treat me bad, do whatever, because I didn't want to lose them. And I was afraid to say anything about what was bothering me. Number 6 was I ended up with a lot of mean and troubled people in my life. I also know that's very common for traumatized people. And this happened not because I wanted it to happen, and definitely not because I thought I deserved it. I didn't think I deserved bad treatment, but because I couldn't see the red flags. I just didn't know how to tell when someone was unstable or even dangerous until I was already, in too deep. I was attached. And even when things felt wrong, I would second guess myself. I assumed if there's a problem, it's got to be me. And that kind of like red flag blindness, it doesn't mean you're weak. It means your early experiences probably distorted your radar. And when you can't see trouble when it's staring you in the face, it makes connection feel like walking through a minefield. Number 7, I didn't believe people cared about me. Some didn't, but I would behave as if, I either didn't open up at all, or I overwhelm people by pouring out my whole life story too fast. Like, I better get it all in. I got to get all the communication in like 5 minutes, because I just thought people didn't care and they were about to get up and leave. But that's not really connecting, is it? Number 8 was my emotions were dysregulated. I'd either shut down completely or I'd explode. And I didn't know how to be present with people when I was at the same time feeling strong emotions, which I was, when you're going through a hard time, that's what's going on. So I was like, somebody who was just learning to drive, brakes, gas pedal, brakes, gas pedal. And 9 was I focused too much on other people. And it wasn't because I wanted to fix them. I know that's like common, but it was because focusing on them kept the attention off of me. It kept my attention off of me. Sometimes I wanted to fix people. And I thought what I was seeing was their potential. And I would just go, they have amazing potential. And I'd almost be angry that they seemed to refuse to be the person I believed them to be capable of being when I first met them. But all of that was a projection. I think doing this helped me avoid the emptiness in my own life. And it was hard to face. I needed a project. I would have rather had somebody who I was proud to have in my life and could take places, but I didn't. So I would put tremendous pressure on people. It's like, come on, act normal. And meanwhile, I'd over-listen, I'd overshare, I'd over-accommodate, and then I'd wonder why I felt invisible or resentful. And I thought I was being loving, but really, I was just disappearing. And the thing about me and many people is I can only disappear for so long. At a certain point, I'll snap, and then I'll be so angry. I'll just be like, why are you allowing me to disappear? So that was kind of how I rolled back then. And when I saw these patterns, I felt a mix of grief and relief. It was grief because of all the years I'd lived without real connection, but relief because finally I had a map. I had something I could work on, something I could change. And so that's what I did. I started taking steps to undo each of those 9 obstacles one by one. And it wasn't instant. It took time. Some things happen quick. Some things take time. It was uncomfortable sometimes. It was embarrassing, but it worked. It did work.